The grain starts moving, and for 1 second, maybe two, it just feels strange, like the floor is breathing. You look down, and your boots are already an inch lower than they were. You try to lift your right foot. It doesn't come up. You pull harder. Nothing. That is the moment. Not the moment you fell. Not the moment you slipped. The moment you realize that the grain around your feet is not going to let you go, and that every second you spend standing here, it is getting tighter. This is what it actually feels like to be swallowed by a grain silo. Not a freak accident. Not a movie. The real thing. And the real thing is faster, quieter, and far more physically brutal than almost anyone understands, because from the outside, it just looks like someone standing in a pile of corn. So here is what this video is going to do. We are going to go through it minute by minute, from the first second the grain moves to the moment a person either gets out or doesn't. And I'm going to explain exactly what the body's going through at each stage, because the science behind this is genuinely shocking. There's also one thing that happens near the end of this that almost no one talks about, and it changes how you understand the entire situation. Keep that in mind as we go. Let's start at the beginning. You're inside the silo to check on the grain. Maybe it's clogged. Maybe there's a crust forming on top, which is called a grain bridge, and someone needs to break it up. Most entrapment events happen because workers enter a bin to check on the condition of grain or to address problems with grain flow. So this is not reckless behavior. This is a routine task that turns into something else entirely. The auger below is running, and when the grain starts moving, it moves toward that drain point at the bottom, exactly the way water moves toward a bathtub drain. Except this isn't water. Flowing grain creates suction and lateral pressure that can bury a victim in seconds, rendering escape impossible without external aid. That suction is what you're feeling in your feet right now. And here's the thing about those first few seconds. They are the only window you have. You can be caught knee-deep in its suction within 4 seconds. Self-escape from grain entrapment is effectively impossible at that point. 4 seconds. That's not enough time to understand what's happening, let alone act on it. By the time your brain has registered that something is wrong, your knees are already locked in. Minute 1. The grain is at your thighs now, and you are pulling with everything you have. Both hands braced on the surface, arms shaking, trying to drag one leg upward. It won't move. Not because you're weak. Because of what grain does when it packs around a limb. Grain exerts forces of friction and pressure on a person that prevent self-escape. Think about it like this. Every kernel around your leg is pressing inward from all sides. When you try to lift your leg, you create a partial vacuum beneath your foot, and the grain above rushes in to fill it. The suction actually increases the harder you pull. So your instinct, which is to yank yourself free, is working directly against you. You stop pulling for a second to think. The grain is still moving, still sinking, and you realize something that most people in this situation take too long to realize. You are not getting out of this alone. Minute 2. The grain is at your waist now, and this is where the physics change in a way that feels almost impossible to believe. A person buried to the waist in grain requires a force equivalent to their own body weight plus 600 pounds to free them. 600 pounds on top of your own weight. So if someone above you grabbed your arms right now and pulled as hard as they possibly could, they would not move you. They would hurt you, but they would not move you. And that is something we are going to come back to, because the instinct to just grab someone and pull is one of the most dangerous things a bystander can do in this situation. Right now, though, the grain is still rising, and your body is starting to respond to the pressure in ways you didn't expect. Your chest feels tight, not in a panicked way, not yet. Just a physical tightness, like someone is slowly leaning on you from all sides. The chest cannot expand fully against the surrounding grain pressure, so breathing becomes laboured even when the airway is technically clear. Each breath in feels like you're working slightly harder than normal to fill your lungs. Each breath out feels fine. But breathing in, the grain pushes back. And as you sink deeper, that resistance grows. The adrenaline hits hard around this point. Your heart rate spikes. You start breathing faster, which is exactly the wrong thing to do, because faster breathing means shallower breaths, which means less oxygen with each cycle. Your body is trying to help you, and it's making things worse. Minute 3. The grain is above your waist now, pressing against your lower ribs. The dust is everywhere. Fine grain particles suspended in the air of the silo, and you're pulling in big panicked breaths right through them. The aspiration of grain appears to be one of the most likely asphyxiation risks during grain bin entrapment. Tiny particles getting past your lips, coating the back of your throat, making you cough. And every cough is a problem, because coughing is a full-body reflex that requires your chest to expand suddenly, and the grain around you is not interested in letting that happen. You try to calm down, try to breathe slower. It helps a little. But the grain is still moving, and you can feel it climbing your ribcage like something alive. Here is the part I promised to come back to. The thing that almost no one outside of agricultural rescue training actually knows. Minute 4. Someone has spotted you. They're at the edge of the silo, leaning over, reaching down. And every instinct they have is screaming at them to grab your arms and pull. Don't. That force does not just fail, it injures. Straight vertical pulling against trapped grain transfers load through the spine and soft tissue. You can cause spinal and joint damage or separate joints long before the grain releases its grip. The grain is not going to give, so all of that pulling force goes directly into your body. Researchers have found that the forces required to yank someone free from shoulder-depth grain are in the same range as the maximum load a human spine can handle before it fails. So a well-meaning rescuer can paralyze you while trying to save you. The right move is completely counterintuitive. Trained rescuers place a cofferdam or rescue tube around the victim and remove grain from inside it. They lower a metal or aluminum tube around the person panel by panel, creating a wall between the victim and the surrounding grain. Once all panels of the rescue tube are in place, this stops the flow of grain toward the victim and blocks additional pressure. At that point, rescuers can start removing the grain from around the victim inside the tube. They scoop it out, they vacuum it out. They slowly, carefully reduce the pressure until the person can be lifted free without destroying their spine in the process. That rescue can take an hour, sometimes longer, and the person inside has to stay as calm as possible the entire time, minute 5 through 15. This is the part of the story that is hardest to explain because it is mostly about endurance. The grain has stopped moving. Maybe someone shut the auger off. Maybe it just ran out of flow. Either way, you're not sinking anymore. You're just held. Packed in from the knees up, pressure on your chest, arms free above the surface, and you have to wait. The muscle fatigue sets in faster than you'd expect. Your legs have been tensed and straining since the beginning, trying to push back against the grain pressure, even unconsciously. Many survivors of grain entrapments report finding breathing difficult even in relatively shallow entrapments. So your respiratory muscles are working harder than normal with every single breath. Over time, that wears you down. Your arms get heavy. Your back starts to ache from the compression. The dust in the air is still there, still being inhaled with every breath,